Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? Welcome to another exciting new episode of Consult the Doctor. I got a couple of questions from the same person, and I'm going to start off with the first one. Best Nikaya model and nib size. You can't say anything negative about Nikaya because then you get lynched. Having said that, Nikaya is not really a brand that I've explored a whole lot simply because a lot of the models do not appeal to me. I think what people fail to understand is that when I say that, that's not a reflection on the brand, that's just a reflection on my tastes. Not everything works for everyone, but if you say that, then the Nikaya crowd will come after you with pitchforks and will threaten to hang you from a lamppost. I very vividly recall the time I reviewed a Nikaya pen and I was not very enthusiastic about it, and someone explained to me that that was because I come from a country that has no culture. So that's kind of the feeling I get about Nikaya, and I'm just not very interested in interacting with this kind of material. So having said that, I'm not the best person to ask about Nikaya, and I will not say anything because I don't want to be murdered. So let's move on to the next question, which came from the same person. I'm just writing down the timestamp. Why can't I find Armando Simoni Club extras and celluloid anywhere? I don't know. Probably because the people who buy them tend to keep them, and then as a result you don't see them on the aftermarket a lot. Having said that, there are a number of people who now sell ASC. I see them in a lot of stores. Chatterley Luxuries has them. I'm pretty sure Bittner Pens has them. So it's not the case that you can only buy them from ASC. So you have to look around. But I mean, this could be said for a lot of different pen brands. I mean, you kind of have to be at the right time at the right place to find pre-owned pens sometimes. You will always be able to find a used Montblanc 149 or 146 on eBay. Whether it's genuine is a different story, but there are a lot of genuine Montblancs on eBay on those kinds of auction sites. I know this because that's where I purchased my first Montblancs, and they were genuine products. So sometimes it's a matter of shopping around. I do think that a lot of people who initially purchased Armando Simoni Club pens see a certain collective value in them because a lot of them were brown Arco or green Arco, and people keep that in collections because the material is now no longer made, so it has a certain rarity value, and that's pretty much all that's to it. So I that's all I would say. You may have to look around more. Okay, this was an interesting question too, I thought. Does a Pilot soft nib cause you to write slower than a regular Pilot nib? I think we can extend that question to nibs that are not Pilot. I have found that there are certain types of nibs that make you slow down as you write a bit. Very soft nibs can do that for me. Italic nibs can also do that for me. Especially when I started out with fountain pens, I noticed that when I wrote with italic nibs, I would write slower than if I wrote with regular round nibs. I'm assuming that's because of the shape, and you really have to be a bit, I should take something flat, you really have to be a bit peculiar about keeping that nib angled properly, because otherwise you can get skipping because it's flat. From that perspective, I would not be surprised if... Not be surprised. It looks the part. It looks the part. I sounded strange all of a sudden. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised. I sound like Lord Windermere, more like Lord Windermere every day. Okay, I would not be surprised if a softer nib makes you slow down because it is softer, because you want to make sure you don't exert too much pressure on it, and that may make you slow down a little bit. And that's okay. What I would really like here is to hear other people's opinion on this, not just on the soft nibs, but also the italic nibs. I talked years ago, and it is really years ago now, when I started with fountain pens, I talked to one of my earliest viewers, and she was, I won't name her just for privacy's sake, but she was the head of a pen club. And she's very kind, and I asked her for advice a number of times, and I asked her this question too: do you feel that you slow down when you write with an italic nib? And she said, no, not really. And I think that now I also don't slow down that much anymore. I think it was just kind of me getting used to writing with an italic nib. I'm not talking calligraphy. I'm talking everyday writing in cursive or something. So what do you feel? Do you feel that certain types of nibs, maybe more specialty nibs, I'm thinking anything, italic nibs, architect nibs, flex nibs, whatever, the sky's the limit. It looks the part. Anyway, the sky, I have to say that more. Do you find that those kinds of nibs make you slow down? That any type of nib makes you write more slowly than a regular nib? Or other type, I don't know what regular means in this context, but then another type of nib. Do you feel that or not? And I think it would be interesting for people to read that, because I do find it an interesting question. Now maybe we can speculate as to why we think that is. Okay, the final question I have is a somewhat philosophical one, but I think it was an interesting question. So, do you have an opinion on Chinese manufacturers? Japanese brands started out largely copying US brands of pens. Will Chinese pens ever have their own identity? That's an interesting question, because it kind of asks me to look into the future. Here's what I will say, and I have said this before in a review, but I don't think this is a bad thing to repeat. In my time in the pen world, which is not nearly as long as some other people have been in the pen world, I have seen a remarkable development in Chinese pens. I am very much aware of working conditions. That's not a discussion that I was attempting to have here. What I'm talking about is the quality of Chinese pens. The initial Chinese pens I bought a good decade ago would often fall apart. I remember one when I opened the box, I bought that for review very early on, blue Chinese pen, I forget which, I think it was Jinhao, but I forget what it was. I opened it up and it basically fell apart as I opened the box, and I joked in the review that actually aided cleaning, because I had access to all the parts. It looks the part. Now, having said that, I think I really have seen an amazing change in pens. Now, I'm acutely aware of the political situation, so I want to be nuanced in what I say here. There is the People's Republic of China, and the Republic of China, I know. What I see coming from the People's Republic of China, some of those pens are wonderful. I'm thinking, for example, of Pen BBS, which seems to make pretty well-constructed pens, which I do not necessarily consider to be copies of, I will use this term very broadly, but Western pens. I don't believe that. I think they've done some cool stuff. For example, their double-ended pens with two nibs, or a nib and a rollerball or whatever. I think there is some nice design there. Their materials, the acrylics they use, often are gorgeous. So I think that's one brand that I think is doing very cool stuff. It is absolutely true that there are a lot of, say, it started, I think, with Mont Blanc imitations coming from China. This is true. I will not argue this. It's simply a fact. A lot of Chinese imitations exist, and there are a lot of fake Mont Blancs. That is true. And then it started to spill over to other brands. There are basically Kaweco Sports that look like Kaweco Sports, but they're from a different brand. There are Lamy Safaris, basically copied, and they come from China. So there is that, but I think it is too generalizing to say that all Chinese pens are copies from other brands. I do think that Chinese manufacturers are creating pens that have their own identity. I also feel that the quality is becoming higher. I don't think the quality is always where it is supposed to be, or where it should be, or where we would like it to be. But I do think that the quality of products coming from China is getting higher and higher, which is not that strange, because I can grab pretty much any item that I see here, and I bet you there's 95% probability it's going to have a sticker on it that says made in China anyway. Right? Okay. Then there is the Republic of China, Taiwan. And I think that there are a lot of Taiwanese companies that do stellar things when it comes to pens. There is TWSBI, and there are some issues, and I'm going to be entirely honest. I don't know if TWSBI really is my brand, but you cannot argue that it is a brand that made piston fillers pretty affordable and accessible to a larger crowd. And I do applaud TWSBI for that effort. There is a company like Laban. This happens to be a Laban pen that I have at hand. It's not a fountain pen, it's a rollerball. This is a solid pen. It's all metal. It's very pleasant to use. It is well made. It's very robust. And Laban has stood out to me. I've used Laban for years. Back for my Dutch friends, when Akkerman in Amsterdam was still in the Kalverstraat, I would go there and they would have Laban. And the acrylics that company uses are astonishing, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And that I really like. So that is something that I have always really enjoyed. Great brand. There are many brands. I mean, there's a host of brands now that I see coming from Taiwan that all have wonderful materials. Many are piston fillers. I've reviewed a number over the years, and I don't have all the brands at hand, but think of Narwhal, which I think makes nice pens. Again, I'm probably leaving out some, but I also don't want to take up all your time. I think that a lot of those pens are amazing, with piston fillers, pens that can be disassembled, all that stuff. And that's all coming from the Great China area, if you don't mind me saying so. China, Taiwan. So, China, Taiwan, yeah, right. So, I don't think we should be disparaging. And I have reviewed a couple of products now from this brand. Sorry, this is not some sort of commercial, but I mean, I just happen to have this because I was recording reviews earlier. It's a flashlight by Wuben. Wuben is a Chinese brand. These are solid flashlights. I've tried a couple of their products now. I'm very satisfied. They work incredibly well. I don't know what else to say. Again, do not forget how many products are made in China to begin with. And I know that there are issues. I know there are issues with circumstances, with salaries, with work environments. I know all these things, and I'm not making light of that. But that's part of an ethical discussion that I don't think was part of what the person asked about. So we'll save that for another day. For now, that's what I think. And I do believe that there is a very interesting future for Chinese pens. And I very much look forward to seeing what that future will be and what kinds of pens China, whether that is the PRC or Taiwan, will come up with. Opus 88, that's another great example. Opus 88, solid pens, very well made. So there are options. There are options. And I don't think we should be disparaging about those kinds of pens. I do think they have an identity. I think they increasingly have an identity. And I think they're often wonderful products. If nothing else, products that allow you to explore a pen without spending too much money. See if fountain pens are for you. And that's worth something too. So, I hope this was interesting to you. I haven't bored you to death. Please leave any other questions you may have below, and one by one I get to them. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye bye. I hit stop.